Hello and welcome, everyone. Episode 11, Second Look Sports. As always, we have Alex Mandarino here, myself, alongside Justin Arnberg and Brandon Brown. And we are battling here, boys. It's that time of the sports calendar. It's really the time of the calendar outside, too, as I look outside my windows to an abundance of snow. But mainly in sports where it's a little bit quiet, right? Super Bowl's
Yeah.
over. Especially this year, Four Nations face off had such a high, and it sort of is bringing us back down to earth. And the lulls a little bit of the NBA and NHL season, but on the flip side, spring training has started in the MLB, so that means spring is coming, and there's a lot of excitement there. Before we get into any sports or anything like that, how have we been managing this quieter week in sports here, fellas? Brandon, let's go to you first. How's the week been for you?
Good. I mean, for me, I've been taking it in stride, I think, taking the extra time that I have to focus on work or focus on other things in my personal life so that I'm not so drilled to the TV or to the computer when things are happening. So it's nice to have a little bit of a lull in the sports season, especially because we're gonna kick it up a notch, I'm sure, in the next month or two with playoffs starting in the NBA and the NHL soon and the MLB regular season kicking off. So it'll be busy, but it's been a welcome little bit of relief.
Definitely. Yeah, Justin, what do you think?
This has been like a weird time it's always the weirdest time in the calendar year because,
Yeah.
it's like 2 to 3 weeks where it's just like nothing happening. It feels like
Mhm.
other than Four Nations, which was kind of like out of the blue, like that usually doesn't happen in the sports calendar, which was kind of cool. But for a sports fanatic, like it's a kind of a lull period right now. All you can really do at the moment is watch NHL hockey, watch Luka and the NBA, and watch, well, in the MLB, watch spring training now, but like still that's really not legit to me. Because I wouldn't say like I'm a baseball fanatic, so that's where I like it when it comes to September, October. That's the time when I really pay attention to baseball. Other than that, not the biggest fan. And then NFL, all we can really do is sit here and just look at prospects and mock drafts and, you know, think about who the Patriots will draft at number 4 overall and who they will
You
spend their
can think of that.
$130 million on. Yeah, I know. That's what I've been thinking about. So.
Yeah, I no, there it's and every year it's like this. I can't even imagine what it would have been like if the NHL just stuck to an all-star format this year. I think I think fans would be losing it. We're like, all right, something's
Did
got to
you
change here.
Did you hear that? I think this is like going to happen. That the NHL is going to do the All-Star game before the Olympics next year. Like
I heard
I don't
rumors
want
of
to
that.
see that. I don't want to see that at all. Like just go to the Olympics. Give them the extra like 2 days off or whatever. Just go to the Olympics. Don't do the All-Star game. No one wants that anymore. No one wants anything to do with that. Do not give us that. So yeah.
If that were to happen, I think the only way that that would be successful is if they basically selected, and at that point they would have had the selection of all of the Olympic team members, and then from the pool of players not selected, then you make
Yeah.
them the all stars, which is not a
Yeah.
true all star game
No.
for the most part.
Exactly.
And I think
Ugh.
that's probably actually the more likely scenario, Alex, because when you think of all the travel involved, they're going to be going overseas, the players in the Olympics. It's probably unlikely that the schedule will allow them to stay in North America unless they want to extend the NHL
It,
break that they're going to be taking
Mhm.
for whatever this All-Star game is. But I could see them, as crazy as it is, I could see the NHL doing something like that because that's just kind of their MO is like, well, do something kind of funky when things aren't going our way or when we're not going to make any money. We're going to try to make some money. So like that's I'm not surprised at all.
because also they have to get I just thought about it. You brought up a good point. They have to go and switch. I know they switch time zones all the time, but like going from like I don't know, West Coast to East Coast, the most you're going is 4 to 5 hours, I think. 4 hours, I believe. But like going over to Italy, I'm not quite sure what that time difference is, so it might be a little bit hard on the body when you first get over there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're probably in Italy, so it's not like once you get there and once you're settled, it's probably not the worst place to live for a
Oh
couple of
yeah.
weeks. But I agree, the time zone change, especially early on, is not the best. So
Yeah.
hopefully they can manage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully they can manage, avoid the pasta, stay on track. And one guy who I think really needs to stay on track and maybe start eating the carbs is Mikko Rantanen. Tough past couple of games, didn't have the best showing in the Four Nations for Finland. And we saw the trade that brought Martin Necas or sent Martin Necas over to Colorado in exchange for Mikko Rantanen and a couple other pieces included. But those are the big dogs. And Mikko Rantanen since has struggled. And as of late, there's been a couple of different reporters that have suggested that Carolina has made an offer for extending Mikko Rantanen 8 years above $100 million in terms of a total value of the contract. And we don't know what his mindset is, if Mikko's going to stay or if it's in the best interest of the Carolina Hurricanes to move him, especially with the way he's been playing of late. So March 7th is the deadline. They have 9 days or something like that, 8-9 days to sort of make that
8
choice.
days now. Yeah.
You know, what do we see as being the likely scenario moving forward if Mikko Rantanen gets traded, or do they make a pitch and sign him to Carolina?
I do have one question for you just before I answer that question.
Mm.
Did you really say I'm going to Italy and I'm having pasta over pizza?
Yeah, that's my choice.
Oh
That's my
wow.
choice.
Wow.
Yeah,
I disagree with that one 100%.
that's
Like
okay.
pizza in Italy, that's like what everyone talks about. I find that more so than pasta. Like I'm sorry. This is off
No,
topic,
no,
but like
that's
you
okay.
took it there. You took it there when you said pasta over pizza. That's crazy. Brandon, what do you think?
I mean, I do love pizza. I love pasta. I honestly do think that in Italy, like the Italians, I think they would probably say pasta is probably
What?
more.
They are
I,
known for their pizza though. They're
yeah, I
known
Pasta
for their
agree.
too.
pizza.
But like they're gonna be they're making the pasta. They're crushing it out. They're baking it. They're doing everything.
So
I'm sure they're doing it head to toe
your first
with
dish
pizza too. But
in Rome. You go to Rome and you're getting a pasta over a pizza.
Every
yeah, I
day.
think there's more places that are gonna give you a
Oh,
pasta
wow.
than a pizza. And like you probably can find both at the same establishment a lot of the time.
No, no,
But
no. I'm asking you. I'm asking you. You're going to Rome. Your first meal in Rome. Pizza or pasta?
I mean, I don't know. I never thought about it.
I
You're on the
just
I
spot.
yeah, you're on the
yeah,
spot.
I don't know. Again, I'm more of a pizza guy traditionally, so like I feel like that is kind of biased. But like
Mhm.
I don't I I don't know. I feel like
Yeah,
I feel
choose
like it's
pizza.
just
Come to the dark side. You know, I guarantee you, if we had the other two Italians on Second Look Sports, Christian Shinidi and Dave Leo, they would definitely say pizza.
You
I
know
think
what?
they're
I'm
going
going to
pizza.
predict, and we'll have to ask. I
maybe.
think Dave's going pasta, and I think Christian would go pizza. And I don't have
Okay.
any reason behind that, but it's just a feeling because Dave would
Okay.
launch into a story about his like family's pasta recipe, and I think that would get him thinking.
But Dave also does like pizza a
Who
lot.
doesn't?
Like a
Who
lot, a
doesn't?
lot.
Who
I
doesn't?
mean, yeah.
Who
So
doesn't?
anyways, back to Mikko Rantanen. Sorry for that little discord there, guys. Okay, so Mikko Rantanen obviously comes over from Carolina or from Colorado to Carolina, and he struggled, and it makes sense because his world's been flipped upside down. You know, you live in Colorado, you're playing with Nathan McKinnon every day, then you get traded to Carolina because they don't think that you're going to sign for $12 million or less than 12.5 because they don't want to go over Nathan McKinnon's cap number because that's their internal cap number, which is all fine and dandy. So, in terms of Mikko Rantanen, the player himself, you would expect this, in my opinion. Like obviously you would hope that he's going to go out there and perform, but like it's kind of hard when your life has been turned upside down in the last month. Now you have to decide, do I want to stay in Carolina for 8 years and make that my home? It's not the easiest decision in the world, considering you probably have only been there once a year, I'm pretty sure, in the regular season for the last 9 years, and that's one night in a hotel. You don't really know the city. So it's kind of a hard decision. The only people that he would have influencing him on that decision is teammates like Sebastian Aho, who is also Finnish and played with him at the Four Nations Faceoff, or the general manager and the front office. Obviously, I think that Carolina would obviously like to get a deal done and feel more comfortable before the trade deadline. But at this point, to me, and this is just what I'm feeling, uh, he's not gonna stay there. He's not gonna be signing a long-term deal. If he wanted to sign an extension, I think he would have done so by now. I really think that Carolina learned from their mistakes last year with trading for Jake Gensel and trying to re-sign him. He didn't want to stay. Obviously, they take that and they use it with Mikko Rantanen. Maybe Carolina's just a destination that people don't wanna be at, like big free agents, because obviously you're gonna throw him the bag. The only other thing that I think is important with this Mikko Rantanen thing, um, is the matter of how much can Carolina get back in return at this point? Because for a rental, I still think Mikko Rantanen is gonna get a hefty return, even if Carolina keeps a little bit of salary. Because if Carolina takes salary, he could come a $2 million player for the rest of the season, which is just insane to think about. Um, so yeah, like I would say Carolina at this point is more so looking at the trade options they have with Mikko Rantanen because I think it's a matter of when, not if, Rantanen gets dealt.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at Carolina as probably pretty desperate to get this sorted out, whether it's Rantanen accepting that large deal, which I don't really see happening at this point, or potentially, yeah, just trying to kind of massage the problem away that you kind of started with this whole thing. Because I think with Rantanen, it's certainly been kind of, I wouldn't call it a disaster because it could obviously change, but you just don't have that amount of runway to kind of change the narrative in terms of his
Yeah.
performance since getting to Carolina. But if the Hurricanes see this as, if there's a larger chance that he's going to walk away, or at least get to free agency, as opposed to extend, I think it's likely that he's going to walk. And I think that they have to try to recoup some of the value that they lost, when they made the trade in the first place. You can't end up with no Netchus and no Rantanen, and then you're just kind of like sitting there when that what didn't necessarily have to happen. So I expect Rantanen to kind of pick it up if he does end up staying with Carolina. They're a great team, and they may be able to still figure it out and then maybe make a playoff run. But for the moment, it's not looking great for either side. I think it's one of those things where it just hasn't really worked out, and hopefully, whether it's up before the deadline this next week or in free agency, I hope Rantanen at least finds a spot where he can land and kind of flourish again as we've seen him in the past. Maybe he needs that kind of number one center in a
Yeah.
McKinnon type to play with. He's playing interesting minutes with, I think, like Roslovic and Svechnikov he's been
Yeah.
on the line with for a little bit. So
That's also a good
um
point because
yeah.
Carolina likes to roll all four lines. They're not like Colorado, who where they're gonna play their big guys like 22 minutes a night. They're forwards, mind you. But like you're saying, like they like to rotate throughout the lines. So it's a little bit different than playing with Nathan McKinnon all the time, or even Sebastian Aho, who would be their number one center right now as well.
That's their
Yeah.
different system, right? They've always played that way. Carolina has just a different system offensively.
Yeah.
But you would have thought that someone like Mikko Rantanen, I think I was reading he was 6th in NHL scoring when he was traded on Jan 24th, I think, or whatever the case was.
25th, yeah.
So you would think that he would be able to drive his own line, and not to say that he can't, because all the factors that were laid out here, boys, are relevant. New city, the shock of not playing with Nathan McKinnon anymore, and you've been there your whole career, and then you get thrown into Four Nations, and you're supposed to be playing with the best players in the
Yeah.
world. It's like a lot of movement, but you really don't want to be caught holding the bag in Carolina's case. That's worst case scenario. And so why I just had thought of this while we were chatting, and there might be factors to it, and I'm sure Carolina has explored it, but I'd be surprised if they wouldn't have considered already offering him like a bridge deal, like a 2-year deal with like a really, really high AAV for those 2 years. So Mikko
What,
Rantanen
so like
is
15
tempted to
million
stay.
AAV? you're saying?
Something like that, because you don't want to make this, like, I know they had more than a month to explore this, and that's probably why Eric Tulsky pulled the trigger so early, is to get the time
Yeah,
with Mikko Rantanen.
100%. Like if you do this a week before the
Yeah,
trade deadline, this is absolutely, and then
it's
you have
and
to
they
hold
did it with
on to the.
Gensel.
Yeah, they did that with Gensel. I'm pretty sure they traded for him like 24 hours or 48 hours before the
Yeah,
deadline, and then he didn't want to resign. I know that that was in talks when they traded for Gensel. Was like, okay, we got him. Now we want to sign him immediately.
yeah,
Didn't happen. That's why they dealt him at the draft or right before free agency started for a third round pick to at least get something back in return. But yeah, this is totally different. And I just have like one quick little fact I found. I was looking at an article yesterday and it was like an anonymous player agents and stuff, 19 or 20 of them. And then like one of the questions was which front office is the toughest to deal with or owner? Sorry, which office is the best to deal with? Carolina was up there for the best to deal with, but then the
Hmm.
most difficult owner was Carolina by a long shot. It was 10
yeah.
votes to 4.
Dundon.
Yeah, like that was one of the things that just caught my eye, and I was like, wait, does that have any correlation to like maybe he doesn't, maybe the front office wants to throw Mikko Rantanen in the bag, maybe he doesn't, maybe he wants to send him like 12-5, 12-6, like Nathan McKinnon, just in that range as well. But like, obviously, it's going to be $100 million contract. We all know that. It's
Yeah,
just, I personally think Mikko Rantanen looks at this summer and he thinks he can get 14 million on the open market.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of it comes down to, like you already mentioned, Carolina is not typically a big hockey destination. It's not, historically, they haven't been able to land too many free agents. They're not usually able to keep, if they have stars that kind of outgrow their market, they're typically not able to keep them. They've done a fantastic job over the last decade, I'd say, of being able to keep talent that has allowed them to be as competitive as they have been. They just haven't been able to break over that, Stanley Cup
Yeah.
kind of obstacle, obviously. But I think you're right. I think from Rantanen, it's more about picking the destination as opposed to Carolina was kind of just thrown in his lap. He didn't
Yeah.
really have the choice. I think with the money involved and then with the term involved, I think he's like 28, I think. So I'd be
Yes.
surprised to see like a 2 or 3 year bridge deal only because that will take him over that 30-year threshold. And then it's kind of like,
What about one
hey, you
more
never
year?
know what. Maybe. I mean, I just think that at this point, like,
What if you gave him
it's
1 year,
it's
16 million AAV?
I don't know. What if he blows out his knee
yeah,
next year
yeah.
and he's
That's the
got
only
16
downside.
million, but then he has to take 60 million because he can't, like that's unlikely to
Yes.
happen, but they do factor in those small risks. So I
Uh,
think that that's probably like, you're probably going to see still in the summer, probably a 7-8 year deal, depending on the situation with the contract. So, but it's, maybe more
and
players should do that if they're able to kind of figure out the market, especially with the cap rising.
I think if he goes to the summer, because he's only going to get 7 years from every other team, or can only get a max of 7 years. I think that's just going to make the price even higher on the AAV side. Like I think you're more so looking with the cap going up and these agents trying to determine what really is going to happen. I think it's this year there are going to be a lot of bad contracts, in my opinion, because no one knows what the hell is going to happen. It's going to be next year when Connor McDavid signs and makes that benchmark that then people can go, okay, he's making this much, so this guy should make this much. This year, it's going to be like the Milan Lucic deal where you signed like what 6 or 7 years for $6 million, and like it was absolute, and the James Neal contract in Edmonton,
Yeah,
those absolute terrible contracts. We're going to look back in 4 to 5 years and we're going to say, who in the world signed these? Well, it's just a matter of the cap going up. And personally, Mikko Rantanen, I know we said 14 million. What if he makes 15 million? I wouldn't be shocked because if the agent wants to get that, because the agent realizes, okay, the cap's going up by so much and he's not going to get another big deal contract before the cap come or before like he's out of his like what 36, 37 years old, they got to take advantage of it and they got to get like as much as they possibly can. So yeah, that's where I think we're at with that.
yeah.
And I think with it's funny because I think with Mitch Marner kind of in a similar position, they're kind of the 1A, 1B if they both get to
Yeah.
the summer. And that almost gives them a leg up because, people go back and forth about who potentially could make more money, and that can only help them in terms of negotiations. In terms of the market, if one signs earlier than the other, they can kind of use that as a marker. So I think it's going to be like, especially with those two players, it's going to be an incredibly interesting, summer if we get to that point with these guys, because who knows what the money's going to look like.
We should definitely change topics, but you know what? The only thing that I can say is to on that point of, it's not gonna like hurt them at all in terms of Mitch Marner and Mikko Rantanen getting more money. Guess who's the beneficiary to that right now? Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because Juan Soto got $765 million and that drove up Vlad's price from whatever it was. Now he's worth more because the price just went up, and that's the difference. And that's what's going to happen with Mikko Rantanen and Mitch Marner. The price is going to go up. That's that's just the nature of the game.
Yeah, we're gonna get to Vladdy in a second. There's so many factors that go into it with Mikko because I didn't even consider, Brandon, the fact that you have to kind of look at your age and kind of consider when is the best time to make the money that's going to benefit you the most in the future. I do think at a certain point, and Elliot Friedman made a note to this, what's $1 or $2 million a year difference when you're making over $100 million a year? I think for him, it's now that what we discussed at the onset of this conversation. Does he want to stay in Carolina for 8 years? Because I think there was also a player poll out recently that suggested that Carolina had the worst visiting room facilities in the entire NHL. I think The Athletic had that poll. And, Mikko Rantanen's obviously not in the visitors' dressing room right now, but that's the only insight that you see, like you mentioned, Justin, when you're visiting once a year. And now it's just so much change. Unfortunately, time's ticking, and I don't see him making a decision for his longevity of his 8-year career in the next 10 days. I mean, a lot of people do it, but it's a tough decision to make when you've been there for a month. So unfortunately, Eric Tulsky looked like a genius. He physically looked like a genius with his hair and the way he's on his spreadsheets. But now he might be looking like, man, this is a big risk. And sometimes it's not a big reward, but you have to just sort of deal with the cards that you're dealt. And unfortunately, that's the card that he's been dealt right now.
Yep.
And the cards that the Jays have been dealt right now are that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has not signed an extension for his self-imposed deadline Monday, February 17th, which is now about 10 days ago. And there's a lot of animosity within the city of Toronto, at least on the baseball side. But the situation is what it is. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is playing as basically a lame duck in terms of he's playing without a contract following this year, the 2025 MLB season. And there's been a lot of discourse about how the season is going to play out. So set on becoming a free agent. That doesn't rule out the Toronto Blue Jays, but at this point, you can imagine, and a lot of MLB insiders are imagining, that he will not be back. The really cool, not cool whatsoever, but it was funny to watch Blair and Barker on Sportsnet's radio discuss this idea of whether this will be a distraction in the room. I don't know if that's the direction you guys want to go first. We haven't really had a chance to talk much on this topic in the first place, so let's just take it away. What do we think here?
I also saw Jeff Blair have a comment yesterday that said Mark Shapiro doesn't believe in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. That was strong to me just because,
Definitely.
That's strong considering how much Jeff Blair is probably, getting inside scoops and like how much he's connected to the Blue Jays. To come out and say like Mark Shapiro doesn't believe in him, that's probably factual, I think. Because if that wasn't the case, why not just sign him to these big contracts? If you're willing to go out and pay Juan Soto, if you're willing to go out and pay Shohei Ohtani, yes, Vlad isn't at that level, but he's the next level, in my personal opinion. So obviously that comes with a price tag of around, I'm gonna say, $400 to $550 million. If the Blue Jays really want to win, they need Vlad. Like that's the short answer. Like they need Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to win. And the more the the better he plays this year, the more the price is just going to go up. So that's where we're at with this Blue Jays team. They should have signed him. They didn't, and now they're going to pay the cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think Justin, you're right on or you hit the nail right on the head with the point about Shapiro and the Blue Jays front office not believing or valuing what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. brings to this team. I think, regardless of how you feel about Shapiro and Atkins at this point, like, it's very clear that they either purposefully have not re-signed Vladdy and do not believe that he's worth, the money that he's asking for, or they simply don't think that he's a good enough ball player to warrant that kind of money. And I don't think either, decision is defensible. I think at this point in the organization, you have to do everything that you can to keep, the number one player for your team in the last 10 years. This is a guy who's helped create a bit of a gap, or stop a gap between, winning games in 2015 and 2016, and into 2020 and 2021 beyond. He's been the main reason, I'd say, why this team has continued to be competitive. Has been for most of his career. He's been, the main focal point of the offense, and outside of one or two down years, he's pretty much done everything that you've asked him to do. So I don't really understand, the hesitancy if they end up signing him, in the season or in the off season. It's probably just going to cost you more. The fact that they weren't able to get this done a year ago, or in the last 6 months, in this off season before his final contract year, it really is indefensible. And I'm at this point, like, I don't have any reason to believe that they will get it done. I don't see why you would.
I don't think they will either. And the other issue is, okay, you also don't just have Vlad on the book this year. You also have Bo Bichette. Like, that contract has gone, like, is so much cheaper at the moment, considering what we saw last year from Bo Bichette. He was probably the one the year before that was going to get paid more than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And now you're looking at a pay decrease from Bo Bichette. So, for me, Shapiro and Atkins are gone. Like, they have to go. Like, if they end up not re-signing Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the city is going to go, or not even the city, the country, because this is the country's team, is going to go abrupt. And they're going to lose their mind because you just lost their franchise guy. Do you think that Shapiro will stay around then? I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I don't think Atkins will as well.
I'm curious because I've always been, like, not always, but of late, I've been like all the fans have been, and all of us looking at this front office being like, what the hell's going on? Like, what in the past, since really their tenure years ago, it hasn't felt like the right fit. Now, there's been so many ups and downs that there's conversations to be had, but I will say I do think this signing and the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. conversation should be looked at in a vacuum, as opposed to everything else they've done this free agent or this offseason. Because early on, there was a lot of discourse as to how they haven't jumped in. They didn't get Juan Soto. And then it came out where maybe they don't want to spend the money that Soto gets. And maybe it's a good thing they didn't get to that level, because that's a lot of money to spend. And then you get Jimenez, and then you get Scherzer, and you're bringing in guys like left and right, and things are getting a little better, but there's still a lot of discourse as to they haven't done enough this offseason. And now, obviously, this is the cherry on top for Jays fans to go and want to basically bring pitchforks to Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro's house. But what I will say is this season will be a massive, and it's not, and it's an understatement, but it's not new. This season will be the biggest determining factor of how this front office plays out, because if Vladdy Guerrero doesn't have a good season, he cuts his RBI and his home run numbers in half, or even like a lower amount than what he did last year, where he was putting up really good numbers, some of the best of his career. It looks like a smart move, and it's unfortunate that that's the way it's going to have to play out. The real question is, if it gets to the point where he's not going to resign because they're not going to have a conversation, you can't just let his contract expire and he walk. You got to try and move him as best as possible and at least recoup some assets for him, as much as I don't know what that trade deadline looks like. But I will say I'm not going to give them grace because I think it's been a really botched job not getting him signed, like you said, Brandon, in the past 6 months. But this will have to be looked at differently than all other signings because you can't just pile this on. This is a way different conversation, and maybe Vladdy doesn't perform well. Although I'm just hoping for his sake he does because he's done nothing but positive things for the Jays since he's been here.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree. I agree, and I think if he obviously they won't sign him now in season. So if you're getting an indication from him that he is more likely not going to re-sign in the offseason, I would imagine that you have to trade him at the trade deadline. I would imagine that has to happen. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I guarantee you, though, for one fact, every single time this team goes on the road, it is going to be talked about. Oh, Vlad could sign here. Would Vlad be a good fit in Oakland? Like, ridiculous places to go, but like every other team can line up now for Vlad because they know he's going to free agency. Like, this is all on the Blue Jays front office. They did this. It's going to become a distraction the whole year. And you wanted to go into a season where you're going to try and win? This is not how you do that.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I want to go to Doncic before we take a break.
You want to finish up with Doncic here? Triple-double in his first matchup against Dallas. This was at Crypto Arena, Crypto.com Arena, so he wasn't made his appearance back in Dallas yet. But I will say, before we get to him, 2.5 million viewers for that game for the LA Lakers against the Mavericks, which was basically the second highest outside of opening night for the NBA. So basically the highest rated or watched game since then, which is understandable. It's the craziest trade we've seen. Where do you want to go with it, Justin?
Just Nico Harrison and him. So pregame, Nico's like staring him down in like warm-ups, like looking at him, like watching him every shot he's taking. And like Luka doesn't even look at him. Like, it's just amazing because on the other side, like Nico's thinking in his mind on that game, man, holy shit, like he's gonna go off on me tonight. Like, he's gonna take this personally. He's gonna like do everything in his power to absolutely rip our team apart. You know what? He did it. He did it. And that game, he really, like, he's just coming back from an injury, but he really, he showed why he's Luka Doncic, and like he's starting to get back into that form, and he's starting to, the first couple games, I will say he was very passive, and to LeBron. I think LeBron understands and thinks that Luka is finally starting to understand it's Luka that needs the ball. Luka needs the ball in the dying second. Luka needs to be the most ball dominant player on that team. It's not Luka's team, but it's like Luka runs the offense on that side, in my opinion. That's where I'm at with him.
No, I mean, you're 100% right, Justin. I think Nico Harrison, it's become such a weird, since the trade, the events and how everything's played out has just been very abnormal because, you don't typically see a guy like, first of all, I don't understand why he was there.
I wouldn't.
The game was in LA. I get you're following the team, but I don't understand why he like had to make himself a story by being down there for shoot around and announcing that they were going to be there, like,
and being on the court. Like, being on the court part is the one that's like, because like NHL GMs will go to games, but they sit up in press boxes. They don't go down to other players or sitting on the court. Like
100%. I thought it was a bit disrespectful to his own team, to kind of make the story or keep the eyes on. Maybe he's trying to help his team by having the focus on the Lakers and on Luka, but it just felt like kind of icky to me the way that he's kind of continued the story along, and it's almost like he's enjoying the limelight. I don't know, but it was just great to watch him get a little bit of payback on his team. It'll be great when they go to Dallas. Hopefully he can put on another type of show and show the fans kind of what they're going to be missing, and they already know. It's just about the weirdness about this whole trade. There's still moments where I don't believe it and I don't know how to feel about it. I don't really see the Lakers as true contenders in the West this year, but it'll be
No.
interesting to see, the landscape of the NBA going forward with a new star in LA now.
I think they knew that they weren't gonna be contenders in the West this year, but, like, they also did not care about that. I think it's more so, "Okay, we got Luka Doncic now, we're gonna build around him for the future." I
100%.
I think that's where they're at with this team.
He's just sitting there, and Nico Harrison is, and their "Thank you, Nico" chants are echoing around crypto.com. Like, did you not expect something like that to occur? Even if you lost, which is Luka's not losing. Like, there's no way he was going to be losing against his former team
Yeah.
at home. I know it's an awkward situation for him, but listen, man, you got to put on a show. And yeah, great point, Brandon. I didn't even think about it that way. Like, not a smart move for the GM to kind of sit down there. You got to take a step back and at least let the dust settle before kind of putting yourself in that spotlight. So,
Like, if it was in Dallas, like, okay, sure, I can understand maybe a little bit more, but it's in LA, like, that's purposefully done,
yeah.
like, by Nico Harrison.
Yeah, I know, but we'll see. I think April is when LA goes and visits Dallas. I don't have the exact date, but it is in April. So that'll be fireworks before the playoffs. But with that, we will take a break. A couple more thoughts on the other side for a couple different points around different leagues, including second look and cheering from the press box. So we'll get back to you then and take a break. And we're back in the break. Just so everyone knows, we had some good conversation about the NHL trade deadline. So we're going to get a chance to dive into that shortly. Just a couple more stories of the week that we want to get to you. We're going to head back to the MLB, where spring training, as we suggested earlier, is in full effect. Some love it. Some are waiting for the regular season to kick off. But the MLB said, doesn't matter. We're going to try something different. Robot umpires. The ABS system is in full effect for spring training. Essentially, what that means is that, of course, there are still human umpires umpiring these games, but there are challenges in effect for hitter and for pitcher, where essentially you tap the head and the MLB will review the play on a challenge call and will review if it's a strike called, if a ball was actually in effect, and they will reverse the call. So far, only a couple of instances of this happening, but players are interested in giving it a shot. Some have come out and suggested that it's a great introduction to MLB, especially after the pitch clock a few years ago. And some think, like Max Scherzer, new Toronto Blue Jays pitcher, think maybe it's fine that human umpires are good. I don't know if you guys have been following spring training super heavily and have kind of like bought into this discourse, but what are your thoughts on the idea of this ABS system? And do you think it's going to benefit or hinder the game moving forward if it's introduced in the regular season?
Personally, I think it's gonna hinder it a little bit. I think, yeah, we want to get this right. And I think it's probably going to happen. I just think for like for like 3 years after it is implemented, for those next 3 years, it's gonna be really hard on pitchers because you're like, as a pitcher, like, you're like, it's probably in your best interest not to challenge unless you're 100% sure, just because the catchers are really good at framing. We saw that with Alejandro Kirk, with Max Scherzer. Thought it was a strike because of the framing, and he honestly was really low. So it's
Yeah.
gonna I think it's gonna shock a lot of pitchers when it comes in, and they're like challenging, and they're like, "Oh, this is 100% a strike," and then it's like, you weren't even close to a strike there, buddy. Like, at the end of the day, um, you know what? Humans are humans. They're gonna make mistakes, and that's a part of the game of baseball. You live with it, you die with it. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of have the same idea. Like, I was watching the Jays game where Scherzer pitched, and I think he challenged. I think at maybe his last batter, he challenged a pitch, and I was kind of surprised to see him do it. Um, and I like that they've kind of gotten a good process, I think, down. They quickly give the challenge call. They quickly go to the replay. They quickly, like, everything is very quick, and I like that. So that it doesn't interrupt the game. But I worry that if you say they do bring this in a regular season, or God forbid a playoff situation, you're gonna have a 3-2 count in the bottom of the ninth. Guy throws what they think is a strikeout. They make the call, and then it's like, wait, put the game. Hang on for a second. We got to double check this. I just think it'll interrupt the kind of the excitement of that kind of late game heroics and what you might see in a, you know, strategy. The count in baseball is everything. And if you're kind of, if you add any kind of hesitancy, or maybe you have guys second guessing themselves in the box or out on the mound because they're like, I want to throw this corner fastball, but I don't know if I can't hit the corner, it's not gonna, like, it just adds a little extra detail of, I feel like, the time kind of restraint of having to do that in a tight, exciting game, and how that affects, especially the television viewer. But also, like, yeah, like, I wonder if these guys are thinking about it in like a more in a performance level way that might just throw them off a little bit. So I think you're onto something, Justin.
Do you
There
think
needs to be. Go ahead. Sorry, Justin.
I was just gonna say, do you think that it will just be because if it's just the pitcher, the active pitcher that can challenge, I think that's okay. But like if we get to a situation where like someone else can challenge the play, like then that becomes an issue because everyone will be challenging every play, in my
Yeah.
opinion, that they don't like. And that will become a major issue. So maybe you have like 2 challenges a game if you're the opposing team, something like that.
Yeah. I
I
don't think
think
it'll get to that point where other people will be able to challenge other than hitter and pitcher. I think at this point, I think that's too complicated.
Yeah, and I like I like that they've capped it. I think it's 3. I think each team right now in the spring training, this little test version of it, I think each team gets 3 challenges, or maybe it is 2. Either way, you can't have a manager making these calls. They're not
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
have the right frame of reference anyway. So like for
Yeah.
them to be calling a challenge makes no sense. And again, it just goes to my point of it's just going to slow down the game. I don't know if you'd have to see the manager get up and get out of the dugout, but I think you'd still see them kind of being like, hey, and then it just adds another few seconds to the whole process. So I agree. I think it has to stay, in the battery.
Mhm.
It is 2 per game, just to confirm. I just did a quick check. So twice
Thank you
per
for
game.
doing
No
that.
worries. If you're wrong, you lose it. If you're right, you maintain that challenge. I just want to get to Max Scherzer's comments because he's the one that opposes the ABS system as a pitcher. And I know, like you said, Justin, like he was basically caught lacking. He was like way under the strike zone. But he says, I'm a little bit skeptical on this. I get what we're trying to do here, but I think major league umpires are really good. They're really good. So what are we actually changing here? We know they're going to be strikes that are changed to balls and balls that are changed to strikes. So we're basically even. And so he went on to do a little bit more conversation. I think it's interesting timing for the MLB because they were successful in the pitch count in 2023. I think a lot of people were happy about how quick the game is going now, and that was the big challenge with the MLB. But I think what the problem now is that, and this is more of an all-around sports topic, but the NHL is dealing with challenge issues now, where you have like some games that have 2 or 3 challenges for goals, and whether they're called goals or not goals, it ends up being this conversation of, okay, there's an extra like 5 minutes per challenge, and it changes the pace of play. I can't imagine what it's like in arena when you're watching a game and there's like excitement, you're banging on the glass, and then the referees have the headsets
Same as like the
in the
other
box.
3, like NBA and NFL, like those sports as well, like those delays or those challenges, like they can be lengthy, like really
Yeah.
lengthy, like you're saying.
And so far, I mean, the MLB, like, it hasn't really been that lengthy. I've seen, you get the quick clip. It's pretty bang on, but who knows how that changes. You brought up a good point in the playoffs, Brandon. Like, imagine this is the fact, and it's the same conversation that's had in the NHL where they're like, imagine an overtime winner in Game 7, and then they're like, oh, coach's challenge. Everyone's gonna riot. So it's not to say that but that's how this would play out in the MLB. But I just think the MLB should look around those 3 leagues, Justin, like you say, and think, why would we step even further into that realm where right now we're winning? And I think that's why they're introducing it in the spring training. And there's no plans to introduce it in the regular season this year. So like,
Yeah.
there's
I
not anything that we're saying that's wrong, but it's,
The one thing I will counteract to you by saying the MLB is probably the easiest sport in terms of that kind of challenge. Just because it's literally going to take 10 seconds and it's going to
Mhm.
show you just like soccer goal line technology. Is it in or is it not in the zone? Like that's what it's going to happen. And it's going to take 10 seconds. There's no like going to be like referee or human decisions going into it. Did this person do this? Did this happen? Like, there's none of that going into it. The challenge is literally just technology. It's just to see
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
think it's a slippery slope because you never know if this leads to more challenges. And it just, I don't want to be the one that's looked at like you're over the hill and like you're the old person yelling at the cloud. But because I do think it's successful with the pitch count, it sped games up. But does this go in the opposite direction? And just, even though it is 10 seconds, it, like, baseball to some people already is considered a little slow. So keep the action going. But hey, who knows? Maybe it's successful. Maybe the players and managers love it. And it's just, you want to be careful with how this plays out, I think, at the end of the day. And then just before we get into our taking a second look here, boys, like we talked about it at the onset of the podcast, but it's been a little bit of a slower week, I think, in the NHL. There's been some great storylines. The Capitals are on fire. Ovechkin is on fire himself. There's been some injuries. There's been, some great games. But have you felt like there's been a Four Nations hangover when getting back to watching NHL action? Or have you felt like you've gone right back into the NHL season and it's just as exciting as it was for the opening night?
For me, I'd say it's just as exciting. I think just the momentum carried over from Four Nations. And honestly, Connor McDavid's been absolutely terrible from coming back from Four Nations, which is kind of shocking. 3 game or since February 5th, he is like the worst plus minus rating in the NHL at -12, which is just non-McDavid stuff. I don't even know if he has a point in his last 3 games, to be honest. He might have one. He might have got one against yeah, I think he got one against Washington. But yeah, it's not been good for Connor McDavid. But yeah, the whole league like carrying the momentum over, it's really been exciting, I think. And like we said last week, the Four Nations face-off just helped hockey. That's all it did. Like it helped hockey grow, it helped them grow. And yeah, obviously you're not gonna have best on best every single game because, we have a bigger player pool in terms of the NHL, but it's still the best hockey players in the world. So it's fun to watch. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was, I think, the first day, I think it was the Saturday after the Four Nations finished up. I think there were some interesting results, a lot of big numbers in terms of goals scored. So I think there was, whether it was goalies or defense, just not
Oh
able to kind
yeah.
of jump back into game speed. I think we saw a little bit of not necessarily a hangover, but I think you saw some of the effects of the 2 week break on some players more than others for sure. Um, but yeah, I think Justin's right. Like we're kind of at that point in the season too where playoff races are starting to heat up, especially in the East. Well, in both the East and West conferences. You're going to see teams really start to make moves as we get closer to the deadline next week. So I think it's just going to continue to build this anticipation towards the Stanley Cup playoffs. Especially in some of the larger markets, like, we're in Toronto where people are really going to start to dial in to what the Leafs are going to do as we get closer to March and April. And in some of the other larger markets where teams are looking to either, go on a deep playoff run or simply squeak in and try to make the most of it. Like the Rangers come to mind in terms of what they're going to do and how they're going to, handle kind of the ups and downs of this season and what they're going to look like as one of those teams in that, in that kind of area of that final wild card spot, like the Senators and the Red Wings. And, there's a ton of teams right now in the East and even in the West, there's been a pretty good race kind of going there with teams like St. Louis and Utah and Calgary and Vancouver. So yeah, almost every game, every point matters at this time of the year. So it's definitely been fun to watch. And I think it's only going to get better.
Damn. Okay. I'm going to take the complete opposite side. But I appreciate you guys. I'm glad it's been as exciting as it has been. I feel like it's been really, really tough to get back into the NHL action. And I will say that as of what day? Today's the 27th. So this will be out on Friday. As of probably Wednesday, the 26th, I think I've been back in action. But I think it's been taking about 4 or 5 days for me to get back into the groove of things. And I still think the Four Nations is the best thing that the NHL has done in years. And it's been one of the best products, and if not the best product that they could have introduced, because people outside of hockey have been dialed. But just like watching the Leafs come back, maybe this is specific to the Toronto Maple Leafs, but if you look at them as a specific example, Saturday playing Carolina, a really back and forth game. They're up 3, they're down, tied the game, then they come, and then you play Chicago on a Sunday night. When I was watching Boston, and that was a fantastic game, Mitch Marner with 2 goals, not slowing down after the Four Nations. Before the first period, I was like, this is horrible. Like the product is not very good. I feel like everyone looks sluggish. I don't know. It's that's the way it's gonna be, and it's a sacrifice the NHL is gonna have to make because it was an unbelievable Four Nations. But I feel like there's just been a tough timing because obviously you're getting back into game 58, 59, and some of the teams that are not in it are a little bit slow to be like, all right, we got to get back into action. But what is the success rate of us moving forward? So I'm going to be honest. I think it's been a little bit slower than I think that, in my opinion, than I expected it to be.
Just the only thing that I can say on that is the NHL kind of timed this perfectly with trade deadline being like so close to the Four Nations because now everything's going to ramp up here in the next week again. And honestly, like when we came into the Four Nations break, I was like, okay, there's still like 3 weeks until the trade deadline. And then it's like, no, it's 2 weeks from the day. Like it's going to happen. Like it is crazy to think like that we're already like 8 days away from the deadline. And that just makes it more intense going forward here for the NHL. And that's what makes the sport great. That's why people also will be tuning in next week, and that's what's going to keep people tuning in. And then you got to go to the playoff race, all the new acquisitions, all that stuff. So, yeah, I think the NHL has been in a good spot.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting to see the trade deadline. They did time it perfectly there, and we will get to that. But I think first we should touch on our taking a second look for the week, looking at maybe something that we want to keep our eye on for the next couple of weeks. You alluded to the NHL trade deadline, could be focused on that, could be something else. Brandon, let's go to you first. Who are you taking a second look at this week?
Yeah, I'm looking today. We haven't really talked a lot of football. Obviously, it's kind of the offseason in the NFL, and something that's kind of become a big story in the last couple of weeks has been the Rams and their quarterback situation. And it's been so my taking a second look is going to be at Matthew Stafford. And for me, this whole story started, it was probably over a month ago, I think, at this point, where his wife came out and was on social media and was saying, kind of unprovoked, that she loves LA and he loves LA, but maybe they're looking at moving somewhere else. Maybe they wouldn't mind being somewhere else, And people kind of took that and were like, oh, is he available? Is Matthew Stafford going to get traded? And as the weeks have gone on, it seems more and more likely that that is the case. And someone who's been apparently heavily involved in this has been Raiders minority owner and famed broadcaster, of course, Tom Brady, who supposedly was meeting with Stafford and is really trying to get him and his camp to accept a potential move to Vegas. So I don't know how you guys feel about this. I don't really understand it from Stafford's view. If he does want to move on, I understand that as an aging quarterback, maybe the team is what's kind of looking at their next steps. But to be in LA, to continue to be, the quarterback of the team that he took to a Super Bowl, for me is a no-brainer as long as he can be there. But maybe there's other options going on. The Raiders right now don't have, a lot of talent outside of, a couple great players, but potentially they'll be on the way up with some new people in the front office and of course some new ownership as well. But I wanted to kind of ask you guys what you think about, and Justin for sure, what you think about Matt Stafford potentially moving on to another team.
I think this is more so on the team because we saw Cooper Kupp, who should not be on the trade block, in my opinion, and he's now on the trade block. I think this is more so the team just trying to refresh and get a new look. But I really don't understand because, like, if you really think about the playoffs, no team came close to the Philadelphia Eagles except for the Los Angeles Rams. Like they gave them everything they got, and they only lost by like what, a turnover, and it was in the snow. Like I don't understand this move considering how close you could have been to literally winning a Super Bowl. Because if they win that game, they might go on and win the Super Bowl. Who knows? But yeah, man, like it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why they would want to move on from Matt Stafford at this point. Obviously he's contemplating retiring, or there was talk of that. So yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling to me that they're putting him in this situation, or he's in this situation. I think personally right now, I think he's going to end up as the Giants quarterback, but that's where I'm at.
I it's weird because Tom Brady sort of ruined it for everyone. Like he played till he was 44, 45. Like Stafford's 37. So a lot of people might look at this and think, oh, he's got a bunch of years left. Like maybe the Raiders will be good in a handful of years. They have a high draft pick. But yeah, it is weird, guys, like that this would be the conversation, or that he would even entertain that option. Because yeah, you're moving to Vegas. That's exciting, but you live in LA. And I know you and your wife might not be super happy, but play another couple of years, you're under Sean McVay. You have a really good young defense. Jared Verse won one of the defensive player of the year, rookie defensive player of the year.
Yeah.
Like it just seems really strange, the timing of all this. But again, it's a podcast. Maybe it's a conversation that was just sort of in good fun. And it was like, oh, maybe one day, even after he retires, he is 37. I would feel like the Raiders is a tough transition, especially after under McVay and living in LA this long.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out, and we'll look back if he does get moved, or if he doesn't, we'll kind of look back and be like you said, Alex, whether that was all a smokescreen or just kind of how things naturally played out. But I think where there's smoke, there's fire, and I know, Justin, you said that the Giants, they were definitely, I think, the front runner early on, and now it seems like more teams are starting to realize that this is something that could actually happen and could definitely benefit their team. Because you're right, I think people thought the Rams might take a step back last year, and Stafford showed that he's still able to carry a team into the playoffs and do some damage. So yeah, I think whoever brings him in will, at least for a couple of years, have somebody who can really help improve their team.
I agree.
It's your second look to this week, Justin.
Oh man. Okay, let's go to hockey. Chicago, let's go back there, and we're gonna talk about Seth Jones, because this guy just he needs to get out of there. He needs to go. He's not having a good season. He's not played up to his career level that everyone thought he was gonna be coming out of the draft in 2013. And wonder why they took Nathan McKinnon over you and Barkov over you. Like Durant could have easily been dropped.
It's a different story.
Yeah, but it makes sense why people were taking over you at this point. And to sign for 8 years, $9.5 million a year, nowhere close to the contract, or nowhere close to the play of the contract. And then his comments the other night after losing to Utah is just, it's kind of crazy, because you got to realize, you guys are way worse than what Utah is. First off. Second off, I don't think he has not lived up to any imagination of being a solid veteran that they can lean on, because that's what you signed him there for, through a rebuild, to build around him on the defensive end. You can't do that because he's not good enough. You can't do that. Seth Jones is just not good enough to be that anchoring D-man that everyone thought he once was. Unfortunately, that is the case. Now, honestly, the return for Seth Jones is not going to be great. I don't think. I really think it's going to fetch a second round pick at best. And I'm not saying Seth Jones is a scrub, but
The contract.
the contract and everything. I figure he's going to Dallas. That's where I imagine him going, with all their LTIR situation going on. But yeah, it's a whole mess in Chicago right now. They really need to move him out. And yeah, it's just pick up your play. You want to, show what you can do. Pick up your play. It's on you. It's not on everyone else. It's on yourself.
No, you're 100% right. Yeah, I think.
Sorry, I just quick, Brent. 5
Go ahead,
more
man.
years at 9.5.
Yeah,
Oh, man.
5
it's
more
ridiculous.
years.
It's ridiculous.
I know you'd have to eat some of that money if you're that team, you would think, or
that
the
is the
Chicago would have
worst.
to. But oh my god,
That's worse than the Darnell Nurse contract. Darnell Nurse is
That's
actually playing
horrible.
better this year, and Seth Jones is just going down a path of absolute terribleness. It's so bad. He's so bad.
No, that I think you're right, Justin, and that's I think what's gonna lead to eventually a trade for sure. Like I don't see it maybe before the deadline just because there are, in terms of the money, and there's probably a lot of moving parts in a team. It just may not be the right time to kind of jump in on something like that. But I think once we get to the offseason and, Chicago and some of the other teams that may be interested in him can have a little bit more, a cap space with once the offseason hits, teams will be able to kind of maneuver things a little bit better. And B, yeah, he'll have a full offseason, hopefully with a new team to kind of refine his game. Because yeah, like just looking at his numbers now since he's been in Chicago, his first year was his best year. 51 points, not bad. Like that's not his career high. He was
Pretty
a
sure
little bit
that's when he got the deal. Pretty sure that's
100%.
when he
And
got the deal.
I think that's no surprise that in a contract year he plays close to his peak, and then things happen to go the other way. But there's definitely something, I think you're right about. He's just not a number one guy. He could maybe be a number two, a number three, in a top four that's got some really good insulation. But I think it's becoming more and more obvious now as we're into, he's been in the league for almost, I think, 12 years. This is 12 seasons. So you're not really playing with a young guy anymore who could, still find his game. It's like, can he find the best of what his game is now? And I think the best way to do that is just on another team where he can have a fresh start.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got to move. It's unfortunate because a lot of guys are like this. And if he were playing for the Leafs, he would have gotten they would have had his head walking down Bay Street on a pitchfork, right? Because of the money he makes and his performance. Now he can probably hide a little in Chicago, but at the same time, it's just unfortunate that he is not a $9.5 million defenseman. If he was making 4.5, 5, it probably would have been such a conversation. And that's just not really fair to him. He signed the contract that he signed when he was offered the money, and anybody would have. But yeah, his comments it's a little tough because you have to kind of put on that brave face as a leader. But we talked about it off air about Chicago in the past few years, haven't really made any strides to be successful. So I can't see how he can be frustrated by thinking we have Bedard, potentially the best player in 5 years, and, or second best, whatever the case is. And, we're still in the bottom feeder of the league. And Justin's laughing because he put out these rankings recently. And I'm going to actually bring up
No.
one of your
I'm laughing
rankings
because
recently.
you said second best players, so I'm thinking
McDavid.
I'm thinking you're gonna say Macklin Celebrini's
Oh,
number
can you
one.
imagine? No, I'm realistic. He's number 3. No, I'm kidding. Now I will, just on that point, if we're finished up with Seth Jones,
Yeah,
it's a great,
we're good.
both very good second looks. You said Matthew Stafford. I'm gonna go with a different Matthew S for my second look in Matthew Schaefer of the Erie Otters. Really random, I know, but the reason I'm bringing this up was I was reading and I saw an interview with him and Sportsnet Sam Constantino, who's obviously very good at the prospects. That's kind of his bag. And Matthew Schaefer is a born leader. Just the conversation he was having. Now, he broke his collarbone in the World Juniors this past year against Latvia, and hasn't played since. I think it was projected to be out about 3 months or so. So he's going to be out for another month at least. And you see him in the room with the boys, reading the lineup cards, the way he's talking to Sam Cosentino, just a very high level conversation and leadership. You can see it's not just yeah, I'm with the boys, it's exciting, but happy to get back. He's really articulating his answers, and you'll have to go watch the clip. It's like a minute and a half long, if that. And you can just tell he is going to be a number one player on any team he gets drafted to. And San Jose Sharks have Macklin Celebrini. The biggest reason he was selected first was his hockey sense and his leadership skills, along with his possibility for Selke votes down the line. I can imagine Matthew Schaefer on the back end with Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith.
Give me Misa over.
I know you had these rankings, and I'm not disagreeing with your rankings per se.
Bro,
but if the
go
San
look
Jose
at
Sharks
Misa's.
are getting,
Go look at Misa right now. Go look at
I
Misa.
know.
That kid is going to be insane, and he's only growing. He is
I
only
agree.
growing.
I agree, but if you look at the Sharks talent pool, and if they pick first, it's going to matter.
Trade Will Smith. Trade Will Smith. I guarantee.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Trade Will Smith
No chance.
and go get I don't know, the 5th overall pick or something. I don't know.
No, you can't trade first overall ever unless you're what?
No.
for
I'm
the
not saying
Sedins.
trade first overall. Draft Misa first overall and trade Will Smith.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Go ahead,
I
Brandon.
think
Jump in here.
I think Alex, you're onto something with. I think it's very, especially in a year like this where there's a lot of, in the NHL, there's often, and it kind of goes back and forth. Like you have number one guys who are like, this guy is the best player in the draft, no doubt about it. And nearly every team that gets an opportunity to draft him would take him. In this year, it's been very much more wide open, and we see this from time to time where it may be just more dependent on who wins that lottery. If you're a San Jose Sharks, you feel good about the young players that you have up front. You go and you take a Schaefer, who's clearly going to be the best defenseman available in this draft, great leadership skills as well, and is going to be somebody that you can continue to build a team around. But if you're Chicago and you get the first pick and you still feel like you have no talent around Connor Bedard, you have I think their second overall pick last year, Levchinov was a defenseman. So, I mean, you've kind of started to build, you got maybe two cornerstones.
If you have
I think you go Misa if you're the Blackhawks.
Chicago, I don't know about that. I think you go Schaefer on the back end. Because I think San Jose goes Misa, and I think Chicago goes.
It's the complete opposite.
Yeah,
but
hey,
I think that
okay.
I think so.
I don't hate the idea. I just think that in the NHL, like if you have younger talent up front, I think you can kind of, at least for a shorter period of time, put together a more solid defense group than you can the opposite. Like if you start to build, if you get 2 or 3 or 4 young defensemen, then you kind of have those guys and they've got to build. But if you don't have any blue chips up front as well, the kind of balance of power will kind of start to fall off. You'll see that where younger players like Seth Jones is a great example. He was in Nashville and then Columbus, especially where in Columbus he was known as kind of the guy and was going to be, their best defenseman, but was also kind of responsible for helping out offensively as well.
So let me ask this question: Pittsburgh. Obviously, Pittsburgh's going to be in the lottery. They're going to have a good pick this year. If Pittsburgh goes number 1 or wins the lottery and they end up drafting number 1, do they go Schaefer, do they go Misa, or do they go Higgins? Like, all 3 options are great. Even Porter Martone's in the conversation. I think Porter Martone's kind of slipped off a little bit compared to the other 3 guys.
I would agree.
Misa came into the year as a top 10 projected pick, and he has skyrocketed and just delivered, man. Like, it is insane what he's doing. So I'm on the point of Schaefer and Misa are like the number 1A, 1 and 2. Like, if it was Pittsburgh, I think they're going Misa.
Yeah, I don't know, because it depends on if Carlson gets moved. Like, there's so much that goes into the conversation there. I think Pittsburgh is in such a weird position that obviously, like, I think the best play, if you're looking at objectively, it's impossible to find number 1 centers, but it's also impossible to find like number 1 defensemen. So I think either way, you can't really go wrong, especially when it's wide open.
No, this is really good conversation because it's going to be intense up to the draft this year. Like the top 10 players in the draft, probably 5 of them will become flops in 5 years. That's kind of what happens. But right now, they all look really good. The top 5 look really, really sound, and they look like they're going to be great NHL players.
Yeah, exciting stuff. I know we are going to get to a lot of the NHL trade deadline stuff, but we will be back next Friday when it is NHL trade deadline, so we can go into some more topics there. But I don't know, boys, if you want to just quickly go through maybe a cheering from the press box moment that you guys have while we wrap up. So Justin, maybe I'll send it right back to you for this one here. Who are you cheering for this week?
Yeah, you know what? I'm cheering for Gavin McKenna to get his mind right. After making the most egregious slash in the history of hockey. To lose his mind that bad or lose his cool was kind of crazy to see. It was really crazy to even think about. He's amidst a 35 game point streak in the WHL. Yeah, this kid is special. This kid is very special. Talk about draft class. That's the number 1 pick for 2026, no doubt in our minds. But yeah, hopefully, this helps reset his mind and focus on the playoffs. But yeah.
I love that. For me, I'm going to go a little bit more just kind of traditional. I'm looking at the Winnipeg Jets, on a 11-game win streak, top of the NHL. They look great. Another great regular season for Winnipeg. And they're, approaching a little bit of an NHL record. If they were to go on another 6 wins, They would tie the Pittsburgh Penguins from 92, 93, 17 wins in a row. So I'm going to root for that. It's some fun kind of history there. Love to see that. So over the next few games, hopefully they continue to win and we'll see some records maybe broken and maybe they'll have a better playoff.
Mark Scheifele
like that.
is pissed he didn't make Four Nations.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah.
can tell.
Yeah. I like it. I like that one, Brandon. We got to cheer for some Canadian teams every once in a while, just to keep the peace and keep the NHL going. I'll stick in the NHL. I'm just cheering for Ovechkin. I might just be cheering for Ovechkin for the next 6 weeks. He's 12 away from beating Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky's in a bit of hot water this week, but we don't need to get into it. I mean, I still want to see some competition here, and I want to see Ovechkin just single-handedly pull the NHL back into the spotlight again after the Four Nations, kind of keep them up there. He's on a historic pace. I think if he didn't get injured, he'd have 59 goals from what I saw. So insane stuff. It would be lovely. And I said this earlier on in the year, I would love to see him beat the record against Pittsburgh in the final game of the regular season. I'm a Sidney Crosby guy, but look at the numbers that would produce if anything. So
I just want to bring this up. I looked this information up yesterday. Ovechkin might be an empty net goal merchant, man. Leading the record, 64 all time. He already had the record broken last year. He's got 7 this year. He's tied for the league lead with Mikko Rantanen. We talked a lot on this episode. But yeah, he might be a goal merchant, man, in the empty net.
It's not how, right, Justin? It's how many. That's what it comes down to. And I'd be interested though. I would be interested to know who has the highest percentage of their goals as empty net goals, because when you've got the most goals all time, it might drop that percentage even though he has the most. So maybe the stats guys in the back can figure that out for us. But I think that's an interesting, because I'm sure there's someone out there with 7 goals and 3 of them were empty net or something. So 50%, that would be crazy. But I'm sure there's somebody out there who only got a cup of coffee, or maybe his only goal was an empty netter. So who knows?
And talking about the Jets, his most ever is 56 goals. 56 goals against the Jets. That's the most goals he's ever scored against a team.
Random team to have that many when you're playing in the Metro, but hey, Jets merchant. Maybe he ends the 11-game win streak. I don't even know if they play each other. 2 best teams in the NHL. In any case, great episode, boys. We'll be back next week to talk more trade deadline in the NHL, but hopefully you all enjoyed. You subscribe, listen, leave 5 stars, watch on the YouTube channels. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you shortly.